Hello everyone, welcome back. This is my part 3 for the video on plant reproduction. We looked at the development of male and female gametophyte in the last video. They develop in the microsporangium and the megasporangium respectively, and at the end, after meiotic division and multiple mitotic divisions, we have the male gametophyte, which has two cells and 3 nuclei, and the female gametophyte, which has 7 cells but 8 nuclei. In this slide, we are looking at the life cycle, and we will look at double fertilization. So here is the flower, the mature flower on a sporophyte plant, which is a diploid. We are looking at the carpel, the female part, and the stamen, which is the male part. Inside the stamen, inside the anther, which is also known as the microsporangium, are microsporocytes, the diploid microsporocytes, which undergo meiosis and then mitosis, producing the male gametophyte, which is in the pollen grain. So the pollen grain has 2 cells, the tube cell and the generative cell. The tube cell has its own nucleus. We see the tube cell nucleus right here. And the generative cell has 2 nuclei, both of them being haploid. They are known as the sperm. So this is a cell within a cell, or 2 nuclei within another cell. So when the pollen grains land on the stigma of the carpel, they stick to the stigma, and the pollen tube starts growing through the style and reaches the ovules in the ovary. The ovule is known as the megasporangium, and the ovule has 2 integuments and an opening known as the micropyle. The opening is the place where the tube cell will grow through the style and will reach that micropyle, and then the sperm or the generative cell nuclei will be released inside the female gametophyte. One of the sperm will fertilize the polar nuclei in the central cell and will become the triploid endosperm. And the other sperm will fertilize the egg and will become the diploid nucleus. This slide goes over it in detail once again. So the pollen grain from the anther, so the pollen grain being the microsporocyte, will undergo divisions and become the male gametophyte. So right now we have the male gametophyte, which goes from the microsporangia and lands on the stigma. Then it starts germinating. We have the pollen tube germinating. Mind you, it's not the seed, it's the pollen grain that's germinating. The pollen tube grows through the style and reaches the opening of the ovule known as the micropyle. In the pollen tube are the 2 sperm, which are the generative cell nuclei. They are both haploid. In the female gametophyte, we have 7 cells but 8 nuclei, which are the results of 1 meiotic division and 3 mitotic divisions. And we have the 2 polar nuclei. They are called polar because they migrated from the poles. They are, however, central, and one of the sperm unites with the polar nuclei, forming the triploid endosperm, and the second sperm unites with the egg. They both being haploid form the diploid zygote. So it is known as double fertilization, where the 2 sperm are fertilizing different things but are happening at the same time. So what's the adaptive advantage for this kind of double fertilization? The adaptive advantage is that there will always be endosperm and zygote formation at the same time. If there is no fertilization, if there is no zygote formation, the plant will not waste its resources making endosperm, and vice versa. So when there is a zygote, a developing zygote, there will be food to nourish the zygote, and that would be the triploid endosperm. And that is the adaptive value of double fertilization. So once double fertilization is done, the zygote develops into the embryo, which will divide by mitosis several times, forming the shoot apex, which becomes the stem, the root apex, which becomes the root, and then the cotyledons, which are going to be the fleshy first leaves of the plant. The seed offers protection for the embryo. It will also have stored nutrients for the growing embryo. We are looking at a cross section of the seed. We see the seed coat, we see the endosperm, the two cotyledons, and the embryo. This is the cross section of the seed. We see the two cotyledons, which will become the first leaves of the new plant. So here is a eudicot, dicot meaning with two cotyledons. We see the seed has the embryo has two parts, epicotyle and hypocotyle, and then those both become the shoot, and the radicle becomes the root. And here we have the first leaves, those are the two thick cotyledons. And here we are looking at a bean, which is a eudicot, a true dicot. It has two cotyledons. Here is a monocot. Maize or corn is a monocot. There is only a single cotyledon, and here the endosperm still continues to store nutrients as is. The cotyledons do not become fleshy. Seed dormancy is a perfect adaptation for tough times. This allows the seed to go into dormancy until favorable conditions arise. It will sometimes allow the seed to be viable for many, many years and endure extremes in temperature, drought conditions, and harsh environment until the conditions are favorable for a seed to germinate. And germination will often happen when there is enough uptake of water, and that will happen when the hormones on the seed coat gets washed off, and also uptake of water will happen due to low water potential in a dry seed, so water will automatically be absorbed by the dry seed. In this slide we look at seed germination of a dicot and seed germination in a monocot. So in a seed that is a dicot, we look the seed, the fleshy cotyledons become the first leaves. Those are not true leaves, those are the first leaves. They're false leaves, and they are shaped differently. They kind of shape like the seed that they are, and then the first true leaves emerge. Epicotyle is the part that is above the cotyledon. Hypocotyle is the part of the stem below the cotyledon but still above the ground, which is the shoot. So epicotyle and hypocotyle are both parts of the shoot or the stem, and then we have the root system. In a monocot, there is no epicotyle or hypocotyle because there is no cotyledons. There is the food stored as the endosperm, and then the coleoptile, that is that single cotyledon, becomes the first shoot or the stem, and then the radicle becomes the roots. Fruit formation and function. So ovary will develop into fruit, ovules develop into seeds, and the function of the fruit is to protect the seed and also help in seed dispersal either by water, wind, or animals. Fruits can be dry or fruits can be fleshy. When they're dry, it dries out, and they are usually dispersed by wind. And if they're fleshy, they could be delicious, soft, and they could be eaten by other plants and be eaten by other animals and be dispersed by those animals at the end. 3 kinds of fruits. They're classified by their development and how they develop. So there's the simple fruit that comes or develops from a single or fused carpel, several fused carpels. Aggregate fruit develops from a single flower, but here the carpels would still be separate. And the 3rd kind of fruit is a multiple fruit. Here there's multiple flowers, multiple carpels. Everything, including the inflorescence, becomes the fruit. Here are some examples. Simple fruit here, 1 ovary, 1 flower, multiple ovules, all in a row. This is known as the pod. The pea pod or any beans, they all grow as the simple fruit. Here we see an aggregate fruit, the raspberry, single flower, multiple carpels, and here the carpels are kind of like separate from each other. They do not fuse to form one carpel, so that would be an aggregate fruit. The 3rd kind of fruit is the multiple fruit, where the entire inflorescence, several flowers, several carpels together with some bracts form this pineapple. It's called the multiple fruit. Over here we see an apple, which is a simple fruit because there is 1 ovary, but those are multiple fused carpels. So when you cut an apple across, you will see multiple seeds, multiple chamber. So it is a simple fruit, but it is also an accessory fruit because the part, the apple core that you throw away is the actual ovary of the flower, and the rest of the apple that we actually eat, the fleshy part of the apple, is not the ovary. It is developed from the receptacle or the stalk of the flower, and hence it's called an accessory fruit or the false fruit. Know that all fruits are developed from ovaries of flowers, and all fruits are a feature of angiosperm only. So in this slide you see lots of fruits and also some vegetables like these peppers and eggplant, and these also develop from an ovary, so they are technically, biologically called fruits, even though you might have learned of them being a vegetable. Here are some images of other kinds of fruits. Here we see the coconut, which is also fruit. Here we see different kinds of gourds. Here is the fruit from the maple tree. It has wings for dispersal. Here is the acorn. So simple fruit, once again, 1 flower, 1 carpel, 1 ovary, 1 seed, 1 ovule, simple fruit. Here again a simple fruit, 1 flower, 5 carpels, they're all fused, many ovaries, many seeds, but still a simple fruit. 1 flower develops into 1 fruit. Also known as the accessory fruit because the fleshy part of the fruit is actually the receptacle and not the ovary. Citrus fruit, 1 flower, many carpels, many ovaries, many seeds. What kind of fruit do you think it is? It is also a simple fruit. Raspberries and strawberries are aggregate fruits because even though the ovaries kind of like it's just 1 flower, but you can clearly see that the ovaries are still kind of separate, many ovaries, many seeds. Each little dot on the strawberry or raspberry are basically the seeds. Again, accessory fruit because the receptacle is the juicy part of the strawberry that we eat and is not really the ovary of the flower that develops into a fruit. Different dispersal mechanisms: water, wind, and animals. Dispersal by water, a great example would be a coconut. Dispersal by wind, a dandelion or maple. And dispersal by animals would be by either eating the fruit, discarding the seeds, or in feces. Here are the characteristics of monocot versus